going on, Steeler Nation? Welcome back to another episode of State of the Steelers. I'm your Steel Current Network host, and today we've got a lot to talk about because we're officially into the preseason where things are starting to get a little bit interesting. Training camp evaluations are now turning into actual game evaluations. Guys who look good in shorts got to prove it when somebody on the other side is trying to knock their head off. Position battles are starting to take shape, and the roster is already a big question mark. And so, but maybe most importantly, we're starting to get our first real look at Mike McCarthy, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and what his fingerprints look like on this team. So the Steelers are coming off a 28-9 preseason win over the Green Bay Packers, and there's a bunch to talk about, as I mentioned. Obviously, everybody wants to talk about Drew Allar and the quarterback room, but we're also going to get into who got paid, which is Keeanu Benton, got a massive contract extension. We're going to talk about the future of Joey Porter Jr. and increasingly interesting wide receiver battle, including also questions surrounding Kaleb Johnson, some of the things I saw from the offensive line that I want to discuss, and so much more. So we got a packed show today. Let's get into it. Let's start off first with the business side of things because the Steelers continue doing something that we talked about all offseason. They're identifying players that they believe are part of their future, and they're locking them up. And now it's time for Keanu Benton. A little bit surprising. I was a little bit surprised that this deal happened because the deal was reportedly 4 years, $72 million, which works out to $18 million per year. If you look at the depth chart, he's not even a starter. But I think they're looking at the potential of Cam Hayward maybe not being here too much longer, and they're needing to lock up the position up front. And I think the move from nose tackle to defensive tackle will probably pay dividends, but you're paying for those dividends now before he's actually put film on tape there. And that's why I like this. This isn't Pittsburgh waiting until the absolute no choice and then trying to figure out what to do. Actually being proactive. As I mentioned, Cam Hayward ain't going to play forever. TJ Watt ain't going to play forever. Some of these veterans who have defined the Steelers' defense for years are eventually going to move on. So who's next? Who becomes the next core defensive guys? Benton has a chance to be one of those guys, a defensive lineman who can disrupt the middle of an offense and become incredibly valuable in today's NFL. Everybody talks about edge rushers. Everybody talks about corners. But if you got somebody in the middle who can collapse the pocket and make the quarterback uncomfortable without having a blitz, well, that kind of changes everything. Now, I'm not saying Keanu Benton is there yet. We still have a lot to see when it comes to that. You know, like I said, I was kind of shocked at the amount given, what we've seen from him. But again, going from nose to defensive end might make the biggest difference. But now the question becomes, because there's another guy from the same draft class that everybody has been watching. What about Joey Porter Jr.? If I'm Omar Khan, I'm at least having a conversation with Joey Porter Jr. Because if you believe he's your number one corner going forward, there's something to be said for getting ahead of the market. Corners' contracts aren't getting any cheaper. And we've seen this across the NFL. Every time another top player gets paid, the number moves up. So Pittsburgh has to decide, do we believe in Joey Porter Jr.? It is a foundational piece of this defense. If that answer is yes, then at some point you're going to have to start figuring out what that contract looks like. I'm not saying you just hand him a blank check. There are still things Porter needs to improve. Penalties have been part of that conversation. Consistency has been part of that conversation. But physically, the dude has everything you're looking for. He's got the length, athleticism, confidence, and the mentality to line up against another team's best wide receiver and say, I'm taking you. Not to mention, this guy was born a Steeler. Literally born a Steeler. And, when you have a position group where the defense has struggled, or the team has struggled to develop corners, and you finally get one that you draft, I think you gotta pay that man. Because at the end of the day, all that is valuable. So now Ben gets his money. Now I'm watching Joey Porter Jr. because I don't think the Steelers are done building the next version of this defense. The question comes, do the Steelers value Joey Porter Jr. as much as the rest of us do? Do the Pittsburgh Steelers see see something in Joey Porter that we don't. I don't know. I've been watching the film. I do all 22 film. If you guys want to check out, my all 22, you can check out my YouTube channel, State of the Steelers, where I have broken down Drew Allar YouTube film breakdown yesterday, and then I think a little bit later on today I might drop the Will Howard, and then on Monday or Tuesday I'll be dropping the Mason Rudolph film, which includes also a breakdown of what we see from the offensive line, which a little bit later on in the show I'll be talking a little bit more about because I had some concerns. But in this situation here, does signing Keeanu Benton automatically mean that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going to sign Joey Porter Jr.? I'm not there yet. I think there was a lot of players that the Pittsburgh Steelers wanted to sign, and they're just getting those done that they can afford to at this point. Let me rephrase that are negotiable. I think there might be a situation where Joey Porter Jr. sees himself as a guy that needs to get paid a certain amount and maybe isn't budging off of that. And I'm not sure how much movement there was with Keeanu Benton, but that could play a role into it. But, we'll see. We'll keep our eye on it. I hope it happens sooner than later. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Should the Pittsburgh Steelers pay Joey Porter Jr. what he's asking? What is your limit? How much do you think the Steelers should pay him? What is the top? What is the ceiling? What is the floor? Where would you like the Steelers to be at? And if you were Joey Porter Jr., to me, I think it's important, right? I mean, that a team invests in you that much, has that belief, and the money probably feels feels pretty good. But all right, so let's talk about a story, or the story that everybody wants to talk about. That's quarterback Drew Allar, 10 completions, 13 attempts, 153 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and a 154.8 passer rating. That's about as good of a preseason debut as you can get realistically, that you can ask for. And here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Drew Allar is already the future franchise quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers in one preseason game. We've got to calm down a little bit, but you are absolutely allowed to be excited about what we saw, because it wasn't simply the statistics, it was how he looked doing it. There are certain things you want to see from a young quarterback. Does the game look too fast for him? Is he panicking when the first read isn't available? Is he immediately dropping his eyes to run? Or does he look overwhelmed by the NFL speed? I didn't see any of that. I saw the opposite. I saw a quarterback who looked comfortable. I saw somebody who let plays develop. I saw the arm talent that made him interesting coming out of Penn State. And when opportunities were there, he took advantage of them. And that's what you want. Now, here's the important part. Can he do it again? Because NFL history is filled with quarterbacks who look like Hall of Famers in August. We're all familiar with one. But that's why I'm not putting a crown on him. But there's a big difference between saying Drew Allar is definitely the future and saying Drew Allar just gave the Steelers the reason to be excited about his future. I'm comfortable with saying the second one. And apparently Steeler fans are excited too, because there are reports of Allar jerseys selling out of the pro shop after the performance. Not going to lie, I think I wanted to go get one myself. The only thing that prevented me from getting a Drew Allar jersey at this point, I don't know if he's going to stay number 16. I like number 16 on him. I think it looks good, but he was number 15 in college. I don't think the Steelers are going to drop Ben Skoranek. I think he's going to stay on the team. Obviously, he's a Pro Bowl special teams player and has some role on the offense and can perform when need be, and is a great blocker as well. And so I don't think he's going to not be on the team anytime soon. But if Skoranek left next year or the year after, would Allar consider it? I mean, if it was just this year, that he was 16, next year he changed it to 15, I think there's a possibility there. But if he's going into like 2-3 years down the road, I think he'll stay 16. But yeah, no, I'm one of them. I'm one of the ones that are excited about it and getting that jersey as well. But all that does is tell you everything you need to know about Pittsburgh. We see a young quarterback throw a couple of touchdowns in August, and we're already ordering jerseys. I love it. I ain't gonna lie, I love it. It's Steelers Nation, and that's who we are. But seriously, there's something else happening here. For years, we've talked about the Steelers trying to find the answer after Ben Roethlisberger, different quarterbacks, different approaches, veterans, draft picks, stopgaps, competition, and Pittsburgh's just been searching for somebody who makes you think maybe that's the guy. Allar hasn't proven anything yet. But for one night, man, he gave me, I'm sure he gave you that feeling, and that's exciting. Now, we had some other performances, from the quarterback position that night that we cannot go without speaking on, and we can't forget about Will Howard. The problem with somebody having a performance like Allar did everybody else get forgotten? And I don't think Will Howard should be forgotten. Howard went 7 for 9 for 86 yards, and he helped engineer a 2-minute touchdown drive. That's good quarterbacking. I like what I saw. As much as I saw and thought that Drew Allar had the best overall performance from the quarterbacks, I thought that Will Howard had the best throw from the quarterbacks. And that was obviously everybody that, saw the game was the one where he stepped up, threw the ball over the linebacker, layered it into Tanyan's hands. That was initially called a touchdown and then taken back. And then on the next play was a touchdown run was done. And so he could have had a score on the board, but I thought he played very well. I thought he's competing, and that's what I'm enjoying about this quarterback room is the competition. These guys are pushing each other. If Allar goes out there and lights it up, Howard knows he's got to answer. If Howard has great practice, Allar knows he's got an answer, and that's how you develop quarterbacks. And Mike McCarthy has a pretty extensive history working along with some good quarterbacks. So if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm interested in watching how these young guys develop under him. Because maybe one of them does become something. Maybe both of them become something. You don't know yet. I don't know yet. But Pittsburgh finally has some quarterbacks who are giving us something interesting to watch. Now, we also need to talk about good old Mason Rudolph. 10 of 11, 93 yards. Nothing too flashy, nothing that dominates ESPN the next morning. Just efficient quarterback play. And sometimes I think Steeler fans already know exactly what they think about Mason Rudolph. People made up their minds. But if you've got to evaluate what happens on the field against Green Bay, Mason did his job. He completed the football. He operated the offense. He didn't put the ball in danger. And it's exactly what you want from him. The young quarterbacks might be the exciting storyline. Mason Rudolph continues to give Pittsburgh a veteran option who understands what he's doing. And you've got young quarterbacks developing behind him. So there's value in that, in the preparation and the day in, day out of what a NFL quarterback needs to do, especially, when you have quarterbacks that aren't anticipated to play this year. Mason Rudolph, who's better than Mason Rudolph, who sat in 2023, who was arguably probably the best quarterback between him, Mitch Trubisky, and Kenny Pickett, still put quarterback 3. And ends up saving the season that year, and takes Steelers on a little run that gets them into the playoffs, and he did that with little preparation and stuff like that. And so, who better to help young guys that aren't going to see the field get prepared for games in those moments than somebody like Mason Rudolph? So, I still see value in him there. I think there might be a push to keep all 4, and I wouldn't be opposed to that. Well, we're going to take a quick word from our sponsors. When we get back, we have so much more to talk about. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us. Before we get back into the conversation, I want to remind you guys of our website, SteelCurrentNetwork.com, your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers news and coverage. Go check it out when you're done listening to me. And while you're there, you can check out the app, Steel Curtain Network. You won't be disappointed. So let's get back into it. Let's talk about the wide receivers, because Germie Bernard gave the Pittsburgh Steelers fans something to think about against Green Bay. He had 4 catches, 61 yards, and what I liked was that he looked comfortable. This is where preseason games can completely change a roster battle. You can have a player who's fantastic in practice. You can have a player who's inconsistent in practice, but then when the lights come on and suddenly somebody looks different. And I think that was kind of the case also with like Caden Wheatgen, because it sounded like he was struggling in practice, did very well in the game. In this situation here, Germie Bernard transitioned what all the good things that we've been hearing about him from practice into the game. And I like everything about the kid, his oomph, his want to get on the field, his want to block, his want to make yards after the catch, etc. I think he's going to be a really good player. And if he can take advantage of his opportunities, now I know it's one preseason game, but that doesn't make him automatically wide receiver 3, but this absolutely changed the conversation because wide receiver room needs somebody to emerge. Now, I know everybody's looking at Roman Wilson and thinking, hey, maybe he's a guy that after a few years might, and I hope he does, and that would be a good problem to have. But what we've seen out of Germie Bernard, if he continues at this trajectory, he could be that guy that is looking to emerge. That could be the future. I'm just, like I said, he's a guy that is going to demand snaps. It's going to be hard to take him off the field, in my opinion, because it's not just the 61 yards that he put on tape. It's how he got those yards, running after the catch, fighting for extra yards, etc. Catching the ball. I mean, he almost made this one catch back in the end zone. Mason Rudolph. If he would have gotten his foot down, that would have been a touchdown. That would have capped off the long drive, etc. Just unfortunate he couldn't get his foot down, but that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. But overall, I thought he did great, and I think he's going to be a guy, if he continues at this trajectory, could be pushing for some more playing time as the wide receiver 3. Now, let's go in the opposite direction. One of the questions coming out of the game involves none other than number 20 himself, running back Kaleb Johnson. His limited involvement has created some speculation about where exactly he stands in the running back room. And I'm not ready to jump all the way to this guy's definitely getting cut. That's how preseason narratives get out of control, to be honest with you. But I do think that it's fair to ask questions because coaches tell you things with playing time. And they tell you things with rotations. They tell you things with who's getting the opportunities and sometimes, more importantly, who isn't getting the opportunities. So I'm paying close attention to that over the next couple of weeks. Where is he entering the games? Who's ahead of him? Is he contributing on special teams? Because once you get towards the bottom of an NFL roster, special teams becomes an extremely important part. You're not just keeping somebody because he'll get in 4 carries in November. You got to provide some value somewhere. And that's what Johnson has to demonstrate. I wouldn't call him gone yet, but I would absolutely call him somebody worth watching. And maybe perhaps somebody that if somebody gets in some dire need in the running back room in another team that you might be able to put on the trading block per se. Now, let's get to an area where I'm probably going to be watching the film even more closely, and that's going to be the offensive line. And specifically, Troy Fautanu. There's been some criticism, concerns surrounding his development and performance on the left side. And this is just one of those situations where context matters. Offensive line play isn't always easy to evaluate watching the television broadcast. Sometimes the quarterback makes linemen look bad. Sometimes the running back misses the correct lane. And sometimes protection changes its change, and so, and not just him, Fautanu, I'm looking at him because he's the left side. On the right side, I am excited to see Maxi Honachor. I think he needs to get healthy. Dylan Cook didn't look the greatest on the right side. I was actually more concerned about Dylan Cook than I was Troy Fautanu, but it's a concern with Troy, not necessarily now because I think that he's going to continue to struggle. It's just a transition, right? He's going from the right to the left. I know he did left throughout college and things of that nature, but, this is why you play preseason. And this is why you get up to speed, because this is when the other teams are actually going in and trying. Not saying that that's not happening in training camp and things of that nature, but it's a lot easier to miss a block, so to speak, when you know that the person that isn't going to hit your quarterback or destroy him, etc. So I've been looking at the all 22. Again, I'm going to be breaking down Mason and looking at his film and specifically the offensive line. But Troy Fautanu has been getting a lot of criticism on the left side. We'll see, guys. We'll see. I wasn't too keen on moving him over there, not because I didn't think he could do it. It's just that I was kind of concerned about all the movement that was going on. You know what I mean? Like, you have Zach Frazier is the only offensive line in the same position that he was last year. There's going to be some growing pains with that. There's going to be some bumps and bruises, that you're going to get because of that. So hopefully, for the Steelers' sake, that those growing pains get figured out throughout preseason. Now, another positive thing that came out of the Green Bay game is that Mike McCarthy reportedly didn't have any major injuries to announce afterward. That's huge. No, it's not exciting. Nobody makes a thumbnail saying breaking news, everybody survived. But preseason injuries can completely change a season. So getting through these games healthy is a win on its own. We already have playmakers like Michael Pittman Jr., DK Metcalf, and Maxie Honachor among those who didn't play against Green Bay. So at this point, I'm more concerned about getting important players healthy for the regular season than proving something in August. If somebody is 80%, just sit them. If somebody has something nagging, sit them. I'd rather have these guys available when the games count. The preseason is about evaluation. The regular season is about winning. So, in conclusion, let's put it all together. The Steelers beat Green Bay 28-9. That's nice. I honestly don't care much about the final score of a preseason game. What matters is what we learned, and I think we've learned several things. First, Drew Allar is worth getting excited about. Not crowning, not declaring him the next Ben or anything, but watching. Second, the quarterback room may be deeper than people expected. Mason was efficient. Will Howard played well. Drew Allar exploded. That's a good problem. The next is Germie Bernard just made the wide receiver competition a lot more interesting. And, one other thing we learned is that there's still some question marks in the offensive line. Let's hopefully get that figured out in the next couple of weeks. Running backs, again, Kaleb Johnson might be on the outs. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Is Rodgers going to play next week? Maybe. And how is that going to affect things? If Rodgers plays, that's going to affect everybody else. The offensive, the other quarterbacks, how much time they get out there, how much time the ones have. That's all going to take a role, so to speak. But let me know what you guys think. I'm excited about this season. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to possibly do some good things. But check out my YouTube channel, State of the Steelers, where I'll be doing film breakdowns. I have a Will Howard breakdown coming up soon, and then a Mason Rudolph in the offensive line breakdown afterwards. So with that being said, guys, I'll see you guys on the Hangover on Monday live. Until then, be safe. Peace.